Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh HaMikdash, Yitro, Yitro, Yitro Temane. Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh HaMikdash, Yitro, Yitro, Yitro Temane. Yeshamash, Shir Chadash.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back to I would say Yiboneh Beit Midrash, but we are still in war mode, and we are in the Eretz Chemda Beit Midrash as guests, thank God. And I want to welcome everybody with a very warm welcome home to Torah. And as you know, that we use the Yakar as the basis for the discussion. Fundamentals, we absolutely deal with major fundamental concepts within Judaism, even though we're only going to deal with perhaps one main verse and then discuss everything about it. Tonight we are in Parshat Yitro, chapter 19, verse 4. When I say we're going to deal with fundamentals, we're going to deal with the fear of God, free will, redeeming captives. So stay tuned. Okay. Another idea is that below in the description box you can find a link to the source sheets. Again, I just hope that you do use the source sheets because learning the Hebrew is so important, and many of the nuances that you actually, when you're learning the Parsha, you won't ever pick up, no matter how many times you try to read it over and over and over again in English. Unless you have a mastery on even the basic level of Hebrew, it will really help you a lot. So let's take, for example, our verse. I'm going to read it in English first, and then I'm going to emphasize the Hebrew parts that we're going to need to concentrate. So as we're leading up to Matan Torah, the revelation and Mount Sinai of the giving of the Torah, God tells us, well, really, we're talking about the beginning of chapter 19, but we're going to deal with verse 4. That's going to be our main, I'm not even on the right page, here we are. The main pasuk, the main verse that we're going to deal with. I will just read to you in English. I don't see why not. In the third month, starting with verse 1, in the third month from the exodus of the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, on this day they arrived at the wilderness of Sinai. They journeyed from Rephidim and arrived at the wilderness of Sinai and encamped in the wilderness, and Israel encamped there opposite the mountain. Now this is still 3. Moses ascended to God, and Hashem called to him from the mountain, saying, "So shall you say to the house of Jacob and relate to the children of Israel." Now our verse. You have seen what I did to Egypt, and what I have borne you on the wings of eagles, and brought you to me. Now the Hebrew is just so much more beautiful, as we'll say, Atem ri'item, you have seen, Asher asiti lemitzrayim, what I have done to Egypt. Now this is the part about the bringing you up. Ve'esa etchem, I raised you up. Al kanfei nisharim, on the wings, or upon the wings, or even above the wings of eagles. Va'avi etchem elai. And this is so beautiful. God says, I brought you to me. Okay, now there is part of Rashi I'd like to explain. What is it about an eagle specifically? So an eagle is not afraid of any other bird. They are attack birds. Okay, they're not afraid of any other birds. They fly quite high, and they put their young over their backs, above their wings, and the only thing they're afraid of is man, because man can shoot arrows at them. So they're protecting their own young with their own bodies. Very interesting idea. That's pretty much what Rashi says over there. Okay, that's about eagles. So the Yakar begins by telling us, and I want to give a little bit of an introduction. There's a famous medrash that he will explain that describes the Jewish people as daughters, then as sisters, and then as a mother. Now, the way everyone may read it is as if there are these levels of intensity of a relationship. A daughter, you may think you have a certain love, and then you would think you would have a greater love for a sister, and then even a greater love for a mother. The Yakar disproves that that's the concept. Rather, he will prove this has to do with, drum roll please, that this has to do with levels of dominion, levels of authority, as a parent may have. Well, let's talk about, okay, let's just start. So the Yakar begins, Hiskir kan shalosh madregot zu, lamala mizu. There's a mentioning here of 3 levels in our verse, right? I will raise you up on the wings of eagles, and I will bring you to me. The Yakar is explaining there's actually 3 levels here, one higher than the next. Because it begins, mitchila amar, it begins with the idea, I will raise you up, ve'aseh etchem al kanfei nesharim. That is 19:4, that's our verse. Vizahu, he says this is the same idea that's brought down in Numbers chapter 11, verse 12, which you'll see number 2 on the source sheet, English source sheet. When Moses is having a conversation with God, did I conceive this entire people? Did I give birth to them? That you say to me, God, you're telling me that I should carry them in my bosom, just like a nurse, or maybe it's a wet nurse, or a mother is nursing, carrying the suckling. Okay, so there's a concept in Hebrew of carrying, kasher yisah, just as a wet nurse carries the suckling. So the Yakar says this is the first level. Azakadosh Baruch Hu madregat ha'av. It's as if God is a parent carrying his child. The Yisrael madregat haben. That's the relationship, father to son, mother to daughter, or parent to child. Va'akar chachamar. Now, in the rest of verse 4, it says, Va'avi etchem elai, right? And I brought you to me. What's that mashma? That infers to you shavim li. That actually, and this, I want to tell you, this is so counterintuitive. You would never have thought of it. That God is actually saying to the Jewish people, yes, you're like a daughter, that means I have a total authority over you. But then you're like an equal. You're like an equal. Shavim li, I'm going to bring you to me. Nihiyeh b'shnei achim shavim b'madrigatam. You're almost your sibling. I'm going to bring you, you're going to be like a sibling, like we said as a sister. Va'achar chachamar, and only afterwards, meaning 2 verses later, in verse 6, chapter 19, verse 6. So you can see that on in number 3 on the source sheet. You shall be as a kingdom of priests. Now, interesting, the Hebrew is Va'atem tiyuli mamlechet kohanim. The Yakar leaves out the word kohanim for I think a certain purpose, because he's going to describe later what that means. But you will be to me as a kingdom. I know this is going to sound extremely strange. God is actually saying what? You will be king over me. You will have the rights, the dominion over me. And I know sounds apikorsis. It sounds so strange. But he adds the words kaviyachol, as if, okay? As if. Mamlachim li, as if you are actually in dominion over me. Now, it says in 2 Samuel 23, verse 3, and we're going to discuss this even more. It says over there, the God of Israel said, concerning me, spoke the Rock of Israel, a ruler over men shall be the righteous man, he that rules in the fear of God. Now, I don't really like that translation, but let's just hear the last words were Moishel Yirat Elokim. Who's the tzaddik? Who's the righteous person? The righteous person is the one who rules over God. That's one way to look at it, or rules in the fear of God. I have a better translation, because we're going to see later on in number 12, Moed Katan. The translation over here from Sefaria was, he that rules over men must be righteous, ruling in the fear of God. That would be how to read that. However, maybe we'll read Moed Katan right now. This is in Moed Katan 16b. How is it that someone can rule over God? A righteous person. We spoke last week about how a righteous person can command a blessing. Moses could have or should have said to the rock, give forth water. Or he could say, son, stand still. That's called ruling over God, because then God has to do what the tzaddik says. But the Gemara doesn't say that. In Moed Katan, it says that a righteous person, yes, they rule over God. The last 3 lines in number 12, it is a righteous person. How is it possible to say that a righteous person rules over God, as it were? Kaviyachol. As God issue a decree, right? God makes decrees all the time. What can a righteous person do? Nullify an evil decree or nullify a decree. So see the power that a righteous person has? This is the Gemara. The Gemara says that a righteous person can nullify a decree. So that is what it means over here. And that's the verse. Tzadik Moshe Yirat Elokim. V'zeh mevuar al derech midrash chazita. So now the Yakar is going to explain everything he already said, but much deeper and clearer, based on a famous medrash that I alluded to in Shir Shirim. Hiviu Ramban Parshas Chaye Sarah, that the Ramban also brought down in Parshas Chaye Sarah, v'zeh lashona. This is the language of the medrash. Sha'al Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai et Rabbi Elazar ben bar Yossi. So Rabbi Shimon asked Rabbi Yossi, Efshar shamata me'avicha mahu. It's possible that you heard from your father the following statement, like what it means. It says in Song of Songs, chapter 3, I'll find where it is on the source sheet, verse 11. It says over there, and I'll read the whole verse, "Go out, O daughters of Zion, and gaze upon King Solomon, upon the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his nuptials and on the day of the joy of his heart." There's no question that the verse itself is somehow relating to the idea that Bathsheba went to bat for her son, when she reminded King David that Solomon would be the king. So there's a lot of merit to Bathsheba for King Solomon being the king. But what it's referring to, Ba'ateret she'itra lo imo, that it's like a mother. The actual mother is being used in this context in terms of, remember, Mount Sinai is the Sinaitic experience when we receive the Torah. So there's a crown. We were also crowned, as if we were crowned with our own mother, the Torah being the mother, or the relationship of God being the mother. Now, let's go back into the actual medrash, because he asks, what does it mean? Amar lo, and this is where he answers him, and he says, Mashal lama hadavar doime. What exactly does it mean, mother, imo? What is the whole crux of the matter behind this statement? Lamelech shahayis lo bat yechida. It's compared or analogous to a king who has a single daughter, just one daughter. V'haya mechavava biyoter, and he loved that daughter very much. U'mitchila kara biti, and in the beginning of that relationship, right, he calls her my daughter. Lo zaz mechavava ad shekara achoti, and that love grew to the point where then he calls this young girl who's growing up his own sister. Lo zaz mechavava ad shekara imi, and then maybe she grows up more, but the idea is that the love continues to grow until he calls this daughter of his mother. So too, this is analogous to the love relationship that God has with the Jewish people. Vikara osam biti, that God calls the Jewish people my daughter. Now I'm going to give you a few verses that go through these stages. In Psalms 45:11, so that's number 7 on the source sheet. Hearken, daughter, and see, sh'imi bat uri. Right? So that's the first idea. And incline your ear and forget your people in your father's house. Then we go to Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 2, where now the Jewish people are called my sister. I sleep, but my heart is awake. Hark, my beloved is knocking. Open for me, my sister, my beloved. Pitchuli achoti rayati, my beloved, my sister. And then Isaiah 51, verse 4, it says, hearken to me, my people, which is with an I in Mem Yud, but then it says, Ulu'umi, so there's a difference between a nation with an Aleph, Umi, which is really like Ami, like Imi, like my mother, going back to this idea of a stage from daughter to sister to mother. So let's go back in the Yakar, and he says like this. So it started off with the bat, velo zoz mechavavan ad shekar machoti, and you see how it developed into this relationship of sister, and we saw the verse in Shir Shirim, and then to the mother Imi, and then Isaiah. We read that Isaiah says, "Hakshivu Eli Ami Ulu'umi," and it's actually written without the vav, Imi. So okay, now we're about to hit where the Yakar now describes what I said to you in the beginning. It's not about a development of a relationship. That's how we seem to have read it all along, and that's maybe how most people would understand it. It's about dominion, and we're about to see how he describes it. Ukfi hanira shemidrash ze lo amar seder madrigot. Okay, that this medrash is not saying over a order of levels of love. Ki mitchila bat. Remember, the first level or the lowest level is bat. Va'achar hosif lechavo kora achoti. And then you would have thought the second level is sister. Let me ask you all a question. Who does the father love more? His own daughter or his sister? So if you want to say, like we've been saying all along, it's about a deeper love, well, it doesn't make sense, because the truth is, a parent loves his own child more than his sibling. So Hosifa zu gerunzu. This, what we thought was an addition, is actually a retraction, is actually worse or diminished, right? The sister is not loved more. So this whole order is now in jeopardy, okay? Ki bli safek sheyoter adam mechaveves bito meachoto. There is no doubt that a person loves his daughter more than his sister. Ubli safek shemidrash zeh medaber b'madregot. Ready? Hamemshala sheyesh lezeh al zeh. But rather, the Yakar concludes that this medrash is talking about levels of memshala, which would be authority or dominion, right? Control. Ki ha'av is Moshe al habat v'chein ha'em. Okay, so for all those feminists out there, hold your belts, right? That the father has more authority, right? Has quite a certain amount of authority over his daughter. And similar, let's just read the words, and similar with his wife, his mother. Aval, not his mother, the mother of the daughter. Ava'ach va'achot shavim hema. But when it comes to siblings, whether it's brother and sister, they're considered equals. Kach mitchila karkrish baruch hu Yisrael bat. That's why the first thing that God calls the Jewish people is bat. Mitzad ahavato Yisrael, because it is love. It is true. Even though dominion and control is being talked about, that's how the relationship began. It began with love. Ach lo yisbrach hamalucha. However, just like it's about love, it says here, nevertheless, to God is the kingship. Look at Psalms 22, verse 29, number 10 in the source sheet. For the kingship is the Lord's. Ki Hashem hamalucha Moshe b'goyim. That's where the kingship ultimately lies. Limshol al Yisrael. So he has dominion over the Jewish people. Kemem shelet ha'av al bito. Very similar to the way that a father would have dominion over his daughter. Now that was with Avraham. We're going to go through Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov in all three of these levels. V'zaya b'mei Avraham. Like the Pasuk says in Psalms 45:11. Where is 45? Number 7. That was the verse we said. Hearken, daughter, and see. So that was the first step in the relationship. So that's Nidrash al Avram. In Midrash Tanchuma, it speaks about this referring to Abraham. Zuhi hamadrega ha'amora kan rishona. That's referring to the first level in our Parsha. Like when God says, I will raise you up upon the wings of eagles. That is the first step in the relationship. When Nesiya Zuhi, and this relationship begins, this bringing up, just as the nurse puts into her bosom the suckling baby. Kasher yisa oimen et hayonek. Just as a nurse carries a suckling. That's the beginning of the relationship. And the next step, God would bring us to even a higher level. Likra oisa machoti. He calls us his sister. We're God's sister. Remember, we said that means you're equal. I told you, this is going to be very counterintuitive. How are we God's equal? Lomar shehem shavim olav yisbarach. We're actually equal with God. Obviously not in every way, but in a certain pattern, a certain way. V'hishva kadosh baruch hu kvodo u'marav yisbarach lekvodam. That God's basically equating the Jewish people with his own honor and his own fear to them, to give them honor. Now, I want to just stop for a second to explain about free will. It says we are created in the image of God and the likeness of God. Well, God has no physical likeness. So in what way are we similar to God? He's the ultimate in free will. We are just a shadow of that, like a fleeting glimpse. In fact, there are those that say it's only a mirage. It's an illusion that we have free will. Like when God gave us that illusion. But nevertheless, it says everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of heaven. So, and I also want to discuss, if you look on page 5, I think this is a good place to talk about it. The very last page, because I want to talk about free will a little bit. This is Rabbi Akiva in Pirkei Avot, chapter 3. It's Mishnah 14 and 15, although I think this is just 15. So Rabbi Akiva said, beloved is man, chaviv adam shenivra betzelem. Man is so beloved that we're created in the image of God. Chiba yisera nodatolo shenivra betzelem. But there was like an extra special gesture of love that God let us know. Just think about it a second. I ask you, you have someone who's a miscain, someone who is down and out financially, and he's living from garbage can to garbage can. And you put $1 million in the bottom of his rucksack. Now you do not tell him, but you put that $1 million there. Did you change his life? You would think, oh, I put $1 million in his rucksack. Of course I changed his life. You know when you changed his life? When you told him. So it's a huge gesture to give him the $1 million. But it's even a greater gesture to tell him. So God created us in his image, but the Torah itself tells us. So the Torah is a very precious gift. It's the instruction manual. To know, right? My Rosh Yeshiva said, Rav Noach Weinberg said, 99% of the world is out there. They're sleeping. They don't even realize they have free will or what the power of that free will is. I just want to read the rest of this Pirkei Avot. For in the image of God, he made man. That's what it says. Beloved is Israel, because they're called children of God. It's a sign of even greater love that he made it known to them that they're called the children of God. So we have this, that's how it all started. Beloved are Israel, for they were given a precious article. This is the Torah. We're talking about Matin Torah. This is the greatest gift of the entire universe, the receiving of the Torah. And in it, it's made known to them that they were given this precious article. As it says, I've given you a good purchase. My Torah, do not forsake it. Right? Ki lekach tov netati lechem, torasi al tozovu. Okay, let's go back into, I just want to read the last parts of this. This is actually the beginning of the next Mishnah Pirkei Avot. All is foreseen, and freedom of choice is granted. So this idea that the image of God is the free will. I mean, a lot of people, obviously are entangled with this question. How are we created in the image of God? There's no question that the image of God that we're created in, He's the ultimate in free will, and we're just a slight image of that. We have a certain limited amount of free will. So the next piece of the Yakar tells us what Chazal say. Ka'amru Rabbeinu Zal, Shahat Tzadikim Doimim Ki'ilu Na'asu Shutafim Lamakom Baruch Hu. So the next level was the equal to God. And the Tzadikim are compared as if they are partners with God. Now this is to Yitzhak. We spoke about Avram being like a Tinok. Here, right, a bat. Now we're talking about Yitzhak as the next level. That's like being a partner. What did God say to him? In Genesis 26, verse 3. Where do we find that? We'll find it. It's number 11. So when God speaks to Yitzhak, He says, sojourn in this land, Gur ba'aretz hazot, and then He says, I will be with you. I will be with you. V'yeh imcha. Now we do notice He says the same words to Yaakov. He doesn't say that to Avram. So we said Avram was not on the same level. Now you have Yitzhak who's on a higher level, and now we're soon going to get to Yaakov. But when God says to Yitzhak, I will be with you, that's going to be synonymous with I will bring you to me. Remember in our original verse, chapter 19, verse 4, Va'avi eschem elai. It's going to be synonymous. One second, let's continue with the Yakar. He says, what does it mean when God says to Yitzhak that sojourn in the land and I will be with you? Hainu b'shava lecha. That I'm basically, you're now my equal. I will be equal with you. Kinetosef lo schuto sh'al schut Avram aviv. You have these two merits. You have the merit of Avram and Yitzhak. Al kein lo ne'emar lashon ayeh imach imcha la'Avram kamo Yitzhak. You never found those words, I will be with you, referring to Avram, only to Yitzhak. V'zuyi madrega hashniya ne'emar kan. And now we understand in our verse when it says Va'avi eschem elai, I will be with you, ki zed doime l'maymar iyeh imcha. Just as I will be with you, you will be with me. Okay? I'm going to bring you to me. So that's the second level. What about Yaakov being the third level? V'yachar chach, kishabo Yaakov chevo nechalato. When Yaakov entered into his portion of his inheritance, he was called the chut hamushulash. The third, like there's a three winding cable, or a three winding thread, a triple thread, which is very hard to break. Haleoto Hashem lemadrega gedola mizu. That meant that Yaakov was raised to even a higher level, to be called a mother. Likra otam aim. He is now on the level of aim. Now we're talking about dominion. So the father has complete dominion over the daughter. That's Avram, and then Yitzhak with this level of equal. So there is this equality, so to speak, if we can say such a thing. But wait, you have to have your seatbelt on. That we're talking about Yaakov, actually, the tzaddik has dominion over God. What is this? The using of the free will. It's the use of the free will. Just like the parent, the mother has control over the daughter. Drum roll, please. Remember I said that everything is in the hands of heaven except for the fear of God. So the tzaddik controls God through his own fear of God, or let's say awe. Kamoshim darshu chazal in Maseches Moed Katan, which we read, Moed Katan 18b. I think we did read that. At 16b, we read that. This is where it explains that a tzaddik can nullify, right, through prayer, through actions, through fasting, through kindness, through learning, through a whole list of things, through mitzvahs. You can nullify, a tzaddik can nullify the negative, or let's say decrees of Hashem. Okay, so that's what it means over there. And guess what? When Yaakov fought with the angel in Genesis 32:28, that's actually 32:29, it's number 13 on the source sheet. I have an excellent translation here. I never looked at it like this. I always looked at it, and it does mean when Yaakov fought with God. But this is from Chabad. They translate it because you have commanding power over God. It's an amazing translation because the word sar is like administrative. It's a very high official, right? That's why we call it Yisrael. We're Sar-El. We are the ambassadors of God. That's what it means, commanding power, because you have commanding power with God. It's unbelievable. It's a great translation, at least according to the way we're learning this Yakar. Therefore, and you overcame the Tochal. So the Yakar says, Afal pi shagam li Yaakov, even though, yes, even according to Yaakov, it also says in chapter 31, verse 3, Eya imcha, I will be with you. God does tell him that, but that would make him his equal. It's true, Yaakov did reach that level, but he even reached beyond to where he is even called God. I know that's Parshat Pshat. We don't read it like that, but Rashi says you can, and we do have commentators. Ki yashar el v'yuchal. I want to take you. It says in Genesis 33:20, right? When he erected a pillar, he named it God is the God of Israel. The Yitro lo, he was called. Depends how you read it. Yaakov himself is called El. Yaakov is called God. So in Rashi, the last three lines, our rabbis in Megillah 18b interpreted to mean that the Holy One, blessed be He, called Yaakov God, rendering, and the God of Israel called him God. So there's many other ways to read it, but that is a legitimate understanding. And it's consistent here, because that would mean that the tzaddik has dominion over God. But again, it's like a, how would I translate it? Understanding? It's like this idea. A limited control stake. In other words, the tzaddik is not greater than God in every way. He's just greater than God in the aspect that it spoke about, in terms of overturning certain decrees of God. So if you were like the CEO, that's like whatever, the chief officer, that's God. So this person is like the tzaddik is like a high, he holds a lot of stock, but it's a limited controlling stake, right? That's how I'll try to explain it. Okay, so let's go back into the Yakar. If you go back to the beginning of Yisro, it says in the beginning, chapter 18, that Yishma Yisro Kohen Midian Chosim Moshe Kol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe Yisrael. The Yakar says, okay, so Yisro heard everything that Elokim, the attribute Elokim, did to Moses in Israel. But in verse 8, when Moses tells over everything that happened, you can ask, I'm going to put it below a link to that class, because I described it better there. I'm just going to go through it quickly. But in verse 8, it says, V'yo Yisro Chosim Moshe, that's 5, sorry. V'yisaper Moshe lechosno, Moses told over to his father-in-law, et kol asher oso yudke vavke, that's the attribute of mercy, to whom? To Pharaoh and to Egypt. This is, again, counterintuitive. You have the name or character trait of Elokim, which is judgment and din, acting upon or manifesting itself, which we would say is in a good way, to the Jewish people and to Moshe. And then you have the Yudke Vavke, which is the representing the manifestation of mercy, and yet it's acting upon, in, I don't know, let's say in a bad way, to these Rishoyim, to Pharaoh in Egypt. So it's very complicated, but basically the Kliyakar explains that what does a righteous person do? He's able to transform or overturn midas hadin to rachamim. And what do the Rishoyim do? The opposite. They bring midas hadin, midas rachamim into din. Okay, so basically, getting back into our subject, how is it that the tzaddik can actually, with kavanah, overturn and have dominion? Okay, so let's go back into the Kliyakar, where we left off. We just mentioned about Yaakov is on this third level. And that's what it means, V'zo shenemar, it's in Gemara Megillah 18a, that Kadosh Baruch Hu called Yaakov El. God actually calls Yaakov a God, meaning to say he's Moshe Olav, that he actually has control over God. And that's what it means here, V'atem to you li mamlechet. You will be to me a kingdom. God, okay, I understand the verse says mamlechet kohanim, but we're going to just stop without the word kohanim. You will be to me, God saying, a king with authority and dominion. As the Kliyakar says, malachim li kaviyachol, as if you have dominion over me. Ki ani goizer gezerah, I can make a decree, but what is the tzaddik able to do? V'atzadik mivotla, can overturn, negate, nullify. V'zachu l'malazu mitzad hayotim b'nei Israel, and we're only able to reach that level because the fact that we're Jews. Kamo shamat inyan, just like it says in verse 3, which we read in the very beginning. Ko tamar lebeis Yaakov v'tagid l'bnei Israel. You are actually being called the Jewish people. Okay, the next two paragraphs are quite small, but it's important to know. V'nochel afarish pasuk. The Kliyakar says you're actually able to explain the verse that we just read. V'atem tu li, you will be to me mamlechet kohanim. We're going to read this as a kingdom of priests. Ready for this? You will be to me a kingdom over the priests. Like we said, mamlechet, dominion over the priests. Malachim al hakohanim. Even within the Jewish people, we have like this seemingly caste system. You have the tribe of Levi. Within Levi, you have Kohanim, so Kohanim, Levim, and then Yisraelim. It's like a caste system because we do give tithes and different gifts to the Kohanim and the Levim. They're called priests. But what does that mean? We have dominion over them. So, ki al yedei kabbalah satorah yesh lomdeha yitron al kohanim, that it was through the receiving of the Torah that we actually have an advantage. Those who learn Torah have an advantage over the kohanim. Even a mamzer talmid chacham gets precedence than even the Kohen Gadol, who is an am haaretz, who's an ignoramus. So there's a Gemara here I wanted to show you. It's actually it's in Horayos. It's number 19. And I think it's relevant today more than ever before. There are these laws when you find something, or if you need to save somebody from a river, saving their lives, which takes precedence. So there, again, women, livers, just hold your belts. The man precedes the woman when there's uncertainty with regard to which of them to rescue or to return a lost item to. Who comes first? But the women precedes the man when it comes to a found garment because of the humiliation that might be involved if she doesn't have the garment, or to release from captivity. Now that's due to the fact that there's a concern that she might be raped. However, when both are subject to the possibility of rape, then the man does come first. But that's not the part I wanted to show you. The part I wanted to show you is in the Gemara and the next Mishnah, that a Torah scholar precedes the king. Okay? The next Mishnah, a priest precedes the Levite, the Levite precedes the Israelite, an Israelite precedes the son born of an incestual or adulterous relationship, we call that a mamzer, and the mamzer precedes the Yiboneh precedes a convert, and the convert proceeds an emancipated slave. But when do all these take effect? That's when they're all equal in wisdom. You always save the one who is the smartest, the one who is more full of Torah. As the last statement says, but if there was a mamzer who's a Talmud scholar and a high priest who's an ignoramus, the mamzer who's a Torah scholar precedes the high priest who is an ignoramus, because Torah wisdom surpasses all. This is a very important thing. That we come to the Torah wisdom. It's the ultimate. Now, the Yakar continued on, and it mentioned, like I said, that a Torah scholar takes, even if he's a mamzer, takes precedence over a high priest who's an ignoramus. Now, there's two more Yesh Omrims, and the Yesh Omrim says, meaning there's another opinion, when it's said in our verse, actually it's our verse, right? Atem ri'item asher asiti leMitzrayim. You have seen what I have done to Egypt. What is that referring to? The makos, the plagues. Ki bizman shava'u hamakos min haaretz. Because when those particular makos emanated from the ground, like dam, blood, kinim, the lice, kiyotz behem, anything similar, then what did God do? He raised us up upon the eagle's wings, meaning shelo tinoz kubem, that we should not be injured by the ground. Ki ilu higbohti etchem min arts, as if I lifted you up from the ground, so you wouldn't become damaged or hurt. Achar kach sheba'u hamakos min hashamayim, shemayim. So then, when the plagues came from above, from the heavens, like Eshu Barad, which really is the same, the fire and the hail came down. So then God says, Avi etchem elai, I'm going to bring you to me. Now, where's God? He's above the constellations. Lahagbi eschem lamala min hamaracha. When God says, I'm going to bring you to me, I'm going to take you out from underneath, I don't know what you call fate, constellations, the natural world. I'm going to bring you, even though it's coming from heaven, I'm going to bring you above that, so you will not be affected. So that's another insight into the verse. Then the Yakar ends with these last three lines. Some say, Shehigbia otam lamala min hamalachim, that God raised us even above the angels, from the angels. Shenikru bale kanafayim. What are angels? Angels they have wings, and they're called the winged creatures. As we see, I think I have one of the last verses here. It's in number 20, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 20. It's referring to the winged creatures will tell of the matter. By the way, there's a famous expression in English that the walls have ears, right? You think, okay, I have to be careful. I'm in a city and I can tell a secret to my neighbor, someone's going to hear me. Guess what? Doesn't matter where you are. I mean, there is a truth to it, that walls do have ears, but even when you're out, no matter where you are, the angels certainly have ears, and they could relay the message, so you always have to be careful. It's not just in a city environment, although Chazal do tell us that in a city environment especially, if you want to tell a secret, try to go outside of 5G, 4G, outside of the walls having ears. Anyway, so here it is that the angels themselves are winged creatures. So God took us above the angels, above the winged creatures, so to speak. Al ze amar, regarding that, it says, Eso eschem al kanfei nasharim, when God says, I will raise you up above the wings of eagles. What does he mean? Nosati etchem b'mala shila mala min kanfei nasharim. That I'm actually bringing you up high above the winged creatures, the angels themselves. Okay, so what I want to do is just wish everyone mamash a Shabbat Shalom. But before we get to that point, to end this video, that we really should take advantage of the fact that we have free will, that we can become tzaddikim. It's not just for those few. We're only going to be judged by who we are, not by who, do we ever reach the level of the next guy. Every one of us should make an effort. B'ezrat Hashem, right? We could change the outcome of this war, right? If we put more kavanah and we say, Baruch Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam matir asurim, right? Who releases the bound in the morning, that we could actually be releasing our hostages that are kept by the enemy. Anyway, B'ezrat Hashem, wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, a great life, and more intense relationship with God and with your neighbor, and we have to keep the unity. There's a new goal of the war, apparently. It's always been my goal of the war, and it's always been most people I know. But apparently, there's a new goal, right? So the goal is not only to crush Hamas, and not only to get our soldiers back, but to figure a way to keep the unity going long after this war is over. So B'ezrat Hashem, have a great life. Good Shabbos.
Shama shir shir chadya